What's going on in your life will be forgotten by everybody around you in a matter of days. The actual failure in and of itself is so small and it just dissipates into the ether. What they will pay attention to is whether or not you pick yourself up.
Welcome to Evolve Leadership, the arena where high-achieving leaders are challenged to redefine their limits. My name is Angus Nelson. I grew up in the United States and I now live in Lisbon, Portugal. I'm an executive coach and I've spent my career advising and training leaders from startups to Fortune 500 companies. And here's what I've learned. An old, ineffective leadership framework will always keep you on a hamster wheel, consumed with work-life balance, burnout, and stress. Here on the show, each week we'll help you rethink the path to achievement. We'll help you discover new principles, new philosophies to the modern leader. Look, the world is relentlessly changing, demanding a new era of leaders. It's time to redefine your limits. So enter the arena, my friend. It's time to evolve.
Well, welcome to the show. And Angus, today I'm really excited because we have, those Dos Equis commercials that have the most interesting men in the world? Well, our guest today, Andy Barrow, who's from the UK, his accent's phenomenal. He is like that to me. Now, how did you guys meet? Did he buy your house? What was the...
He bought my house. Yes. And I'm telling you, I love this guy. I love what he shares and the candor that we have in this conversation, because he and I have become really good friends. And he has an interesting background of all the things. Like, he used to have his own show where he was a carpenter and he'd like fix people's homes and stuff, of which the house that he bought from me turned it into this magical place with this massive deck on the back and hot tub and just gorgeous. My wife is like, why did you do that? Like, okay, whatever. I wasn't Andy, right? Well, he's got a background. He was a lead singer for a band called Crazy Jane. He was in music and television for years and then got into marketing and more specifically into the tech world. And so lastly, he was leading an eye care company. And since this interview, he's actually left and he's doing some other things. But we captured such a moment. I wanted this interview to be shared. And I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation with Andy Barrow. Well, hey, Andy, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being with us today.
I tell you what, I couldn't be happier. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
For a long time? We've known each other now for 4 or 5 years. How long have you lived in my house?
Right. 4 or 5 years. Yeah,
so quick backstory. We met because he bought my old house and has turned it into a magical paradise. Way better and comfier than I ever had it. That's for sure.
It's become home for sure.
Yeah.
It really has.
All the pictures, all the stories, amazing. So I want to dive in today into some of the story because I've gotten to know you, because we've gone out for drinks, and because of everything you've experienced. I want to kind of roll back into your past and bring that into this conversation around the quest for more. We are hungry and thirst for accolades, validation, position, power, et cetera, et cetera. How has that struggle kind of unfolded for you in most recent? And then we'll jump into the back and kind of build the story.
That's spot on, right? I mean, that's ever since I was 16 years old, that's all I've ever known. And I've just turned 54, and I'm only now at a place where I've sort of been able to figure a large part of it out. So for me, at this time in life, after the pursuit and the ride and the ups and downs and the left and rights and the inside outs that, a pursuit of more takes you through. I mean, in the rest of your life, your personal life and everything else, I finally, I don't know what happened, if I got hit by a 2x4 when I was working on the house or whatever happened, but I realized that, what I was doing wasn't working for me. And not only was it not working for me, it was working for me in some manner, right? I mean, externally, to the outside world, it looked like it was working just fine. But to me and to the people closest to me, it clearly wasn't working. And, I've lost along the way as a result of it, and things that I would have rather never lost. So now, I look at everything through a much clearer lens, quite frankly, with a lot less noise around it. So I'm at a place of peace,
Yeah.
relative peace in my life. I mean, I think we would like to think that we could arrive there, but I think it's a lifelong journey. And even on your deathbed, you're still struggling with things on your way out the door. So, but where I'm at now, it's definitely the best place that I've been in 30 plus years of working.
Oh, well,
30 years.
congratulations. And I love that. And there's this whole premise that I kind of carry that is like, we never miss anything. We never fail at anything. Everything that we've experienced and endured is like lessons learned. It is wisdom gained and is an advantage for your future. And so it builds upon builds upon builds. Your story is obviously you're from the UK, and then you got into the media world. You worked both with a record company. You also did music. You're a front man for a band. If I remember correctly, it was what was it?
Crazy Jane.
Crazy Jane. That's what it was. And then
Crazy Jane. Named after an ex-British girlfriend. Yeah. So, I mean, that happened really too. 6 months after I got here, I was at a Halloween party. I was dressed up as a fireman in these crazy, like yellow rubber suit with an old fireman's helmet that I'd found in Chester, New Jersey, and these black rubber boots. And they were a great band, but the singer was awful. And I just went up to them, and I was literally a few sheets to the wind at that point, and I drunk. And I said, can I sing a song? I said, honestly, I'm actually pretty good. And I sang Round Here by the Counting Crows, and the following day I was the new lead singer. And that's how that started. And that was a 4-year journey that ultimately led to me working for Warner Brothers. So I went from Warner Brothers, and then I joined with the two founders of Muzak. Remember that company that was responsible for all the elevator music?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yeah. So I joined with them to create a marketing company that served all the 4 major record labels, and got to work with artists like John Mayer, Norah Jones. I mean, you name it. I mean, just hundreds of artists through these networks that we created, real life marketing. And then from there, I went into publishing for a very short stint. It was a Christian publisher in Bend, Oregon, Sisters, Oregon, rather, that wanted to sort of inject, sort of marketing type approaches to marketing and reaching consumers, relative to books, which is a lot harder to do than you'd think. But anyway, I mean, needless to say, we did very, very well. But I didn't love it. So to your point, that's when I started my television show, which was a sort of a sooner foray, as I realized that I really wasn't going to be leaving the States, but my end goal had always been in architecture. I'm like, what can I do here that is going to fulfill some of that passion that I'd lost, doing things that I didn't really care as much about, especially the couple of years stint in publishing. So I reminded myself of, what I always wanted to do with that love as a child that I'd had, which was to design things and build things. And at the time, HGTV was just literally getting started.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, you had a couple of shows on the network, nothing like now where it's just massively saturated, with every version of it. Yeah, I did that for 6 years. Yeah. Started with a 15-minute video on demand thing on local cable. Then it went to a regional show on ABC, and then it broadened up from there. And then if it hadn't have been for the financial crash of 2008, 2009, we would have been on Discovery Channel. But then, yes, I went from there. I started an NFL related company here in Nashville, my first time in Nashville. Again, I'm not a football fan at all. So again, it's so true. I mean, you can do a great job, but if you're not truly passionate about it in here, you cannot give yourself everything to it. So I left there, went to New York, and worked for the very famous futurist Faith Popcorn, for 4.5 years on Madison Avenue. And that was by far the greatest experience of my life, as far as work to date. it was, I got to see everything about the future. I got to see how the Fortune 50 worked. It was an invaluable experience. Then I came back down to Nashville, never thought I would ever come back here, and started a consulting company, one that I believed in so much that I branded all over my body.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'm like, if you can own this thing, own it. And I have ever since. And the messages behind it that, I wrote 12 years ago and still passionately believe in them today.
I think some of your story actually reflects that ambition, that pursuit for more. So you're going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. For you, what were some of the gremlins, the demons, the unfortunates that having a hunger like that created?
I mean,
Yeah.
there's one in particular that really kickstarted me and flipped my mind at a very young age when I asked my wife to marry me. Just when we were in New Jersey and I was in the band, she was like, "Well, how are you ever going to support me? You never went to school." And it put this deep seed of doubt in myself. I mean, and it embedded it deep, deep down in me that, oh no, I've already failed before I've started. I'm going to have to work twice, three, four times as hard as anybody else to make a difference. And that's why when I got to Warner Brothers, I mean, I literally went like that up the corporate ladder. But meanwhile, I ignored my wife for the entire period of time that I was in that. So when you talk of a gremlin and the simplicity of the seeds that can change the direction of your life and how you go about thinking
Yeah.
about everything, that was one for me for sure. And it took decades to dislodge it.
Yeah. So the stories that we tell ourselves are everything. And you just brought up, one, I'm sure of many. And for all of us, my wife and I were actually just having a conversation about this. I'm trying to put together my own marketing piece. And I was like using all of my words. She's like, but what does that even mean? Nobody even knows. You got to give it some words, give it some description, give some context. And it was all about some of these things that we face in our belief system, in our limiting beliefs, in our stories we tell ourselves. And while we're chasing after the thing, you said before we came on that it's kind of like an animal, it's a beast. Can
Oh
you
yeah.
share that a little bit more, unpack that?
At that moment in time, it made me realize what my role was about to be in a relationship, and that was provider. And it sort of like struck the chord of all of the primal nature of us as men, right? That we've got to go out and we've got to take and provide and gather, and none of the other things that have become certainly much more important over the decades as men for us to pay attention to, like emotional maturity and things like that. I mean, that was nothing. It was just club, kill, fight your way through, the noise, other people. Yeah, I mean, you're just basically like a rabid animal. And, you have just all of a sudden, you've been able to grab onto something tangible that resonates with us as men, that you can then go, okay, all right, that's right. Thanks for the reminder. That's what I'm here for. That's what my job is. And so now I'm just going to go do that. And I'm going to focus on it, pinpoint focus, laser focus on just that. I was a disaster of a human being back then, but I was very effective in the jobs that I had.
Yeah.
Because that was my only focus. That was the only part of me that mattered. It was the only thing that I thought anybody cared about. So therefore, I'm like, fine, I'll be that. And I went for it. That's why my hair's white when it was black.
And as we also joked around before about a practice spouse, so that
Yeah,
became
that's funny.
a relationship that didn't last with the focus that you had on the work. Part of my story as well, I went through something similar, and I know a lot of other men who have. As we're in that pursuit, that beast, that hunger, that thing, what were some of the things you thought would be on the other side of that goal? Like, if I just get to X, then I will get Y.
I thought that the other side was a long way off. So I didn't pay it a whole lot of mind. All I knew was anything that she ever wanted or ever needed, or I had to provide.
Mm-hmm.
And I did all of those things. We lived in a beautiful home on 5 acres in the middle of nowhere. She had 2 horses. It was a dream come true on the outside. But again, I was gone 5 days a week doing that. I'm away from the home. And then, of course, she is in the middle of nowhere in a giant home with 2 horses, but she didn't have me. And that's what she really wanted.
Yeah.
Again, you said, what's on the other side? And I was like, there was no other side for me, really. For me, this was it. This was my job. But I thought eventually, once all of her needs had been met, and I'm not singling her out. She's a
Yeah.
great person. And we are still great friends today, by the way.
Yeah.
Great friends
Awesome.
today. It was, I thought on the other end would be sort of retirement. I thought this was going to be it for me. That may not be a good answer, but I mean, it's really what I thought at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the other side of it. I just thought, this is my job. This is what I'm here for. This is what I am. And this is all I am.
You know, it's interesting. On an Enneagram, I don't know if you're familiar, how familiar you are with the Enneagram, but as a 3-wing 2, validation is a big piece of things that drive me. And so trying to do more, trying to do these things in some realm are going to bring me attention, accolades, affection, whatever. There's something on the other side. And sometimes my wife and I will, be in conversations, or less I say, arguments, and she'll say something in just the right way. Well, let's be honest, to me, it's the wrong way. And it hits that little button about I'm not enough, or I didn't do it right, or I got it wrong, or I failed. And anything around that, I have to check myself, because I'm like, that's not really what she means, but that's how I'm interpreting what it is. That's some deep psychological stuff that comes from words that somebody said at some point in my life that create a story, right? So for you, as you're now, getting to this other season where you have gone from these different roles, you're now sitting as, co-founder and CEO of Iris, this eye care and contact lens company. You're now operating on a different frequency, a different echelon than what you were, say, 5, 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. What have been the pieces of your leadership that you've honed in, both to balance the quest for more, and how do you help your team be more effective and more efficient?
Let me just pause for a second to say this. There is one trait that you will find in every successful leader, no matter their industry, no matter their role. And that trait is action. And we want to inspire ambitious leaders like you to bet on yourself and take action on those audacious goals that you see in your heart. That's why we created our 90-day accelerator. It's a results-driven, battle-tested framework designed specifically for high-performing leaders like you to get unstuck and propel you towards your goals. And in just 90 days, you won't even recognize the person you used to be. To be a part of this elite community, go to EvolveLeadership.org. Now, back to the show.
I don't even know that I got that good at it over time. I got great at it out of necessity. I got great at it at the point where I almost came completely undone as a human being. I couldn't keep pushing. I have all of the most terrible traits that you would ever want to have as a leader to some degree. And at the time, as I progressed through, I didn't have any of the emotional maturity or stability to be able to make any sense of the other stuff that was important, and not just important to me, important to others. I mean, I've had some incredibly harsh nicknames as a boss over the years. I've never had a problem with relationships with people. I've always been able to have solid relationships. But the difference came out of a necessity that either I was going to lose everything or I had to change everything. I think I probably had the closest thing to a nervous breakdown. I had to let go. I held on to everything so tightly because I was so afraid of failing. Obviously, fear is I feared my entire life, predominantly based on that one sentence that if I can't provide, I have no worth as a human being. People that work for me were always like fearful that they were going to get fired if they weren't just like amazing, or whereas now I'm fine with people failing. I'm
Yeah.
fine with people failing. As long as they learn from it, I'm fine with it. I've never been fine with, failure in general, but it's of course a critical piece of what shapes you and forms you to be a better person and a better leader and a better husband, boyfriend, partner, whatever it is. I've never had kids, so I've never had the joy of being a father, but I love kids. It's one of my biggest regrets too. And that's something that I cheated myself out of in my life because as a result of work and never being home. If you're not home, certain things don't happen that actually allow kids to happen. And none of that stuff happened. It wasn't
Yeah.
important to me. I knew that if I didn't continue on the path that I had chosen to get on, that I was going to be a broken man into my dying days.
Yeah. And you were too smart to allow that to happen. You mentioned, getting a counselor. And for so many men, like asking for help, asking for directions even is such a difficult, challenging thing. At what stage in your leadership or in your career was that a necessity? Like you said, did it come to that place where you broke down and burned out, or did it take more for you to finally like say, hey, I could really use somebody in my corner?
As men help feels like if you need help that you're weak, or weak-minded, weak-willed, whatever it is. And it's such a superficial fallacy that we don't need help. We need help in a real big way. And it's only recently in the evolution of men, right, that we've even been open to it and can accept it. And the base of human men is broadening, which is wonderful because for future generations, they're not going to suffer like the fools of our generation because they're constantly going to get smarter.
If you were to look at, everything that you're learning now, like you're sitting down with a 35-year-old guy and he thinks he's washed up and he thinks like, oh, now what? And you and I both know like 35, that's like nothing. And they're thinking, well, I'm out of the game. You've had enough life to take some hits, but you haven't lived enough to really hone in on what really matters. What are some of the things you would say, hey, bud, pull you aside, put an arm around this dude and say, here's what you got to know?
I don't know that even now at 54, that, if anything was to happen to Iris, that I wouldn't sit there and, well, that's it. I'm 54 now and, it's over for me. There's never going to be anything else. That was one of the things that, of course, that I love to reference now because there's always been something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I can say so lightly and deliver it in such a way that it really does put them at ease. Because, again, we know what it's like to feel those first hits, right? Some of the first hits are the most painful because they're unfamiliar. And all of that emotion that comes with them is just so raw and intense that, of course, it doesn't feel like there could possibly be anything else. How is anybody going to ever look at me the same way again? There I was, high on the hog, living the life, and now I've got nothing. So for me to sort of, when they say that, I only sort of grin and shallowly laugh only because it's just like, I totally get it, man. Do I understand exactly what you're going through? But let me tell you something. It's just the first hit's the hardest. And I'm like, you know what? You've got to let it sink in. You do have to have the time with it to go through the emotions. Don't cheat yourself out of the emotions of feeling what you need to feel. But know this. This is the first of probably several more before, unless you're one of the very, 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 very lucky few to get it right very, very, very early on. And I said, here's the good news. I said, your life, if you think today's headlines don't have a timeline, your what's going on in your life will be forgotten by everybody around you in a matter of days
Yes.
before they're back to their own lives. And you don't need to worry about them. They know you as a person. They know what you're capable of. They know the effort that you put in and everything else. The actual failure in and of itself, the nucleus of failure, is so small and it just dissipates into the ether so fast. What they will pay attention to is whether or not you pick yourself up, whether or not you get back on the horse and try something else again, whether it's the same thing again or something completely different. So I love that conversation because, it's such like an moment. It's like, it's, I know. Oh, I know. I know. I know how it feels. It's awful, isn't it? Absolutely awful. But you're going to feel it again, and it's going to be less awful each and every time. And you will. I said the other thing that you need to do too is, why did you fail? Can we look at really why did you fail? Because of course, for me, half the time it was always being the only one carrying the entire weight of everything on my own. So I just sheerly collapsed under the weight of it all.
Yeah.
But what was the reason that you failed? Let's really look at that. And if you're really interested in not feeling this shitty ever again, then let's learn from it right the hell now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's what I would say to somebody, whether they take it this time or whether it resonates. I mean, because again, I had people tell me that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have people tell you that?
Oh God, yeah. In fact, I can remember when I went through my self-destruction, when I lost my business and addiction and just hit rock bottom, divorce. And this dude put his arm around me and said, 5 years from now, you will be a completely different man and you're gonna be grateful for it. And I was like, screw you, like, shut up. Like, I was in so much pain and agony that I couldn't even see that far into the future. I couldn't even give myself that much grace or hope. And sure enough, 5 years later, I'm like hanging out with this woman who's knocking me out of my socks. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like, my life has changed so much, who I am and what I became. That's exactly what you're saying, is like, if we'll embrace that suck, man, how much further, faster can we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people want to run away from it as fast as possible. But I mean, it makes sense to spend some time with it as long as it's productive time. So it does take a long, long time to stop hearing those voices or learning how to ignore them. You still get them?
What I like to say is their voices get quieter. You can speed up the speed at which you can get over those voices when you start doing work on your identity. Like the practice that I do with my clients rapidly gets them to a different construct in their own brain about how they see themselves. And then those old voices, those old stories start to lose their power very quickly because they can reflect on, well, that's not who I am anymore. That story doesn't even make sense anymore. And so that's where these things start to lose their power and influence in our lives. But that's a really intentional thing that someone has to do. But I think that's a critical piece, is understanding your identity outside of what you do. But who are you being?
Yeah.
Who are you becoming?
But I mean, that was exactly it, right? That's all I was the job or the role in the job. I never looked at anything else outside of that, ever. Have you ever talked to yourself in the mirror?
I do. I learned from my dad. This is really funny. He would see us out of the corner of his eye as we'd walk past the bathroom, and he'd see us as we were walking by, and he'd look in the mirror and say, "You good-looking mother, don't you ever die." And as I've gotten older, part of my practice has been around affirmations. And so sometimes I'll actually like look in the mirror, and when I have a gremlin, in my head, I'll actually talk to who I really am, and I'll say things out loud. And sometimes I don't realize I'm saying them out loud, but it's kind of my way to combat that other voice.
I don't think this struggle ever goes away. Do you?
Well, like I said, it's not that it's going away. It's just that it loses its power. So
Right.
I think if self-awareness is truly intact, self-awareness knows the story exists. It just knows how to navigate past it. Yeah. And
the trouble is, you don't know where the finish line is. That's the sad thing too. I mean, I've lost several friends over the last couple of years that were taken way too early. And I think events like that too have happened where I'm just like, they just got their life together. They just started to figure out a few things, and they didn't get to realize the joy of those changes they were making in their life. So, it sounds horrible to say this, but things like that honestly accelerated the urgency of there's nothing wrong with wanting a better life for yourself. There's nothing wrong with wanting more for yourself and your family and your friends and your, just the people that you come into contact with. And when it starts to happen, it becomes really quite joyful, right? You just feel good about everything. You start to feel good about everything. And you're like, God, this is great. And I want to do this more and more and more. And I hope I get to do it for a long time. So don't wait to enjoy your life. Don't wait to do the right thing for the people, the right things for the people around you, because you're going to benefit from them just as much as they are.
Yeah.
You're going to love better, live better, work better, lead better, be better. Again, thank you, by the way. What you're putting out there in the world, I truly believe is really resonating with a lot of people. And even though they may be slow to react, you know it. You can't stop doing what it is that you're doing. It's way too important.
Thanks so much for taking the time to being with us today and sharing your wisdom and candor and just being you. Thanks so much. As we wrap up another episode of Evolve Leadership, thank you so much for taking time to invest in you. If there's to be any sustainable growth in your company or even in your relationships, you must grow first. And it's what I love to do for leaders, to help them grow, to challenge their thinking, sharpen self-awareness, to instill an unshakable confidence, and ultimately upgrade their sense of self. And we do this through our proprietary method called Agile EQ Plus, where we're leveraging agile leadership and emotional intelligence. We provide our signature training for individuals, and for businesses, we've designed a unique curriculum for company-wide learning and development. If you'd like to learn more about our training or to schedule a call, you can simply go to EvolveLeadership.org. And until next time, stay driven, keep climbing, and never stop evolving.